We are going to do a deep dive on Ohio State. So let's go to that, Joe. I don't know about national title hopes coming off of the national title that they just won, but we've been doing these deep dives. Let's talk about Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yeah, I hope that Ohio State fans are realistic for the expectations of this upcoming year. It's really hard to be ready to play back-to-back national titles, to win back-to-back national titles. The path is now longer. You are now in this world where those that have accomplished this have had a NIL commitment, including yourself, to bringing back key starters. And once those key starters leave, there's a little bit of a reset period. Again, it is something that we have not seen in college football. So as we do a lot with these segments, I'd like to point out this is the long list of players that are leaving for the NFL draft. They didn't lose really anybody important in the portal, but they're losing Josh Simmons, who went down at the beginning of the season with an injury, so he applies a little bit less. Seth McLaughlin, your starting center, in the same boat. But you're losing Emeka Ibuka, who is a former 5-star receiver and has been there for a long time. Tyleik Williams, who is a dominant defensive tackle. Both defensive ends, JT Tuamoilau and Jack Sawyer. Both running backs, Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Donovan Jackson, who's your starting guard/tackle. You're also losing your starting quarterback, Will Howard. Safety, Lathan Ransom. Cornerback, Denzel Burke. And there's even more guys that I didn't include on this list. There is a large core that is being replaced, but Ohio State has done a great job of recruiting, which as we dig into this further, they are better equipped to bounce back than most teams typically are.
You started off with what I was going to start off with Ohio State. So there's two schools of thought. There are teams out there in college football. When you recruit the way that Ohio State does, you don't rebuild, you reload. Ohio State is one of those teams. They don't rebuild, they reload. But, Joe, they still went 10-2 last year. They still had flaws throughout the season. They still were figuring some things out and some things that they were doing. You brought up, look, they're losing two running backs. They're losing two edge guys. They're losing a lot of DBs. The problem that I have with there is who's being replaced there, right? And it's so much talent when those guys are leaving that they're being replaced with. Now, they went out in the portal. They got two offensive linemen, the left tackle and Ethan Onamawa. I can't say his last name to save my life. Onanawa.
Yeah.
And then they went and got the right tackle and Phillip Daniels. Okay. And then they went and got Max at tight end. Max Clare at tight end. I look at them in such a unique perspective because I don't know if they can win a national title. Think they can win the Big Ten, though. Like, I mean, they're that talented. Are they poorly coached? No. Now, the things that scare me are this. You're replacing two coordinators, right? You're replacing everything with two coordinators. And as high as I am on Ohio State, I am very interested to see how all of that replacement, two coordinators, a lot of dudes in the draft, how do you respond from something like that? That is a lot to respond from. Joe, I still think that they're a bona fide playoff team, though, because I look at what they got along the offensive line, how they recruited there. I still think that they might be okay, if I'm not going to say better, but good at running back. Does Julian Sayin live up to the expectations of what we have for him? You know that you got freaks of nature at wide receiver. But, Joe, when there comes a lot of young, inexperienced talent, there's also comes a lot of mistakes. And I'm interested to see how they respond from something like that. Now, there is something that I do think that they've tried to do. There have been multiple defensive tackles that have entered the portal. None bigger than Syracuse's Murad Watson, that Ohio State is very much involved in here. What do they feel about their defensive line if they're going in the portal the way that they're trying to do here? That would be my question too. So as high as I am on them, I think they're easily a Big Ten contender to win the conference. The question that I have is, like, can you overcome all of those obstacles?
So, well, the first thing you just brought up there, I was listening to another show, the Cover 3 podcast, which is CBS Sports' premier college show, and they brought that same talking point up as, like, Brian Day seems to have brought up that they're going to look in the portal for defensive tackles.
Well, they already offered Murad Watson, right, to your point there.
So, like, how much of an indicator is that they feel they're lacking depth, they're lacking talent at a position that has been a strong suit for them over the last 3 years? They've had some great players that have come out of that defensive tackle room. I think that when we look at this roster for this upcoming year, you brought up something that's really important. They have they have the best returning receiver in Jeremiah Smith. They have one of the best, if not the best, returning safety in the country in Caleb Downs. They have one of the best returning linebackers in Sonny Styles. So they have premier players that will make up for the fact that they are asking younger guys to now step up. But where the unique consideration of what's going to happen this upcoming year, there's two questions that I'm asking myself. What does the turnover at coordinators, both coordinator spots, how does Matt Patricia do? How does Brian Hartline do as the new OCDC? And does Julian Sayin live up to this ridiculously high hype that we've placed on him? I feel like that we are throwing out a lot of expectations. Part of me kind of this reminds me, Blake, of when CJ Stroud took over for Ohio State, where everybody was kind of like waiting and thinking like, man, like is CJ Stroud ready for this? Like we're coming off of all these great seasons from quarterbacks. Like, is he going to be the guy? And he hits the ground running. He's a little slow to get going, but as soon as he hits his stride, he looks fantastic. And the rest is history. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Best game I saw Georgia, that Georgia game.
Yeah.
Remember, right.
It was unbelievable. I think that Sayin has the tools and the mental makeup to be a great starting quarterback for Ohio State. But those questions do need to be answered, and they have to be answered quick because they start the damn season with Texas. There's no messing around.
All right.
I don't want to get in the schedule just yet, but like that's right. The point is that there's no
hold on. The point on Texas. But Joe, you got two tackles along your offensive line that from the portal. Mm-hmm. Newsflash to Ohio State. I'm not saying you're losing the game. Please don't take what I'm saying as I'm saying that they're losing the game. We're not even close to predicting that. You're going up against the best front seven in the country. Texas has the best front seven in the country. Joe, is there really a debate? I mean, I don't know if that is a debate. Julian Sayin's never started a game.
It's very as apt as you have placed that is an extremely valid point that we're overlooking. We're overlooking.
8 of 11 starters offensively are gone.
Well, so actually, let me take a step further. Sayin actually has not officially won the starting job yet either.
Okay. I'm not. Julian,
I'm just saying he's probably going to start
starting quarterback. Okay, come on. Let's be real. I mean, Aaron Nolan doesn't leave because Julian Sayin's losing the job. He doesn't leave if he's losing the job.
No. What I would counter that by saying that Nolan is leaving understanding that he is fourth on the depth chart behind Tavian St. Clair.
Okay, fair. But still, I still wanted Aaron Nolan to be good just based off of the name. I say 8 of 11 offensively, but 2 of those were running backs. I mean, you could do either which way you want with that. Joe, I got to be real with you. I am a little bit worried about them defensively, especially in the interior of that defensive line. The thing with me about their defense is when guys are going in the portal at DT, I don't know how much I like that, right? Like, I understand if it was a depth situation. Texas is doing it from a depth perspective, right? Like, Texas going out there going after DTs is a depth perspective thing. It's not a starting thing. Like that's where they're at. So I look at you losing 9 of your 11 starters defensively. You're bringing in a new coordinator, by the way, who's never coached a college game. Now, the flip side could be brought on to that in this sense. The last time that we saw a Belichick run defense come into college football, they went from the 120th ranked passing yards per game at Washington to number 1. That's a massive difference. So this thing with Patricia can work. I'm not saying it can't. How many obstacles does he have to overcome for them to not have issues? Offensively, for what it's worth, I think that they're going to be fine. At receiver, running back, I feel like at offensive line, they'll be fine. I have a lot of hopes in Sayin. My worry is the lack of depth along their defensive line. That's where when you start, let's say they beat Texas, okay? You can come up for a game in game one when you're not beat up. When you go on the road in the Big Ten later in the season, how much does that depth warrant it? Like, you're going to need that depth. I do think DT is their biggest issue right now from a depth perspective, and I don't know if it's remotely close. So I think Matt Patricia ultimately will work there. I've kind of changed my tune on it. I really didn't like it at first, but now that I've kind of gotten to think about it, I do like it. At the same time, it's just so much to overcome. But, Joe, what are we overcoming, 10-2? I mean, is that where we see them? Like, so that's the point where I'm at. Now, they do start off with Texas. It's going to be a very interesting game coming out of the block here, mainly due to the fact that you have a first-time quarterback with that defense.
Yeah. Before we talk about that upcoming schedule in that game specifically, I just want to address the point that you make. I disagree with any fear that their defense is going to be the issue. I think that defensive tackle specifically, if we were going to highlight a specific position group that, hey, we have no idea if they've got the room for it. Like that feels like if they're going in the portal, they think that they need more depth. But I would argue over the past 3 years under Ryan Day, they have been one of the most well-recruited, not named Georgia, more than Alabama, more than a lot of SEC programs, more than Michigan or Notre Dame. They've been one of the most well-recruited defensive teams in the country, especially at corner, at safety, at linebacker, at defensive end. You're asking new guys to step up. Defensive tackle, I will concede, is a question mark. I actually feel like I have more fear for their running back room because you had to bring in C.J. Donaldson from West Virginia, who's a quality player, but just because you have to go and grab somebody like that, are you worried about the fact that you've got two freshmen listed currently on our lads as your third and fourth running back? And I think that the offensive line aspect of this is something that we always talk about. You've got two new starting tackles that were transfer portal guys. I always get a little weird, feel a little weird about that when you're bringing in two new guys that are from the portal that are starting right away.
Fair.
Josh Simmons, who was an awesome player for you guys, his first season from San Diego State wasn't all, rainbows and sunshine. He took a little bit of time to get going. It is a position that does not immediately hit the ground running.
The only counterpart to that I would say is Seth McLaughlin won the Remington Award. So to an Ohio State fan saying that you can't develop a kid in the portal very quickly at a place like Ohio State was a guy that we thought was the biggest liability at Alabama, literally won the best interior offensive lineman award.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, and by the way, that loss against Michigan, I don't care what anybody tells me, is lost because McLaughlin's not there. It's lost because protection is off. You can't get a running game going. But to your point, though, tackle's a completely different situation, and you had to go in the portal and get it. Defensive tackle being a worry for me is basically because the last time that they had a defensive tackle issue was in 2022 when Jim Knowles got there. 252 yards at the end of the season was Michigan running the football. Now, it's a completely different team, but the last time I saw you have depth issues at that position, you got your asses whooped.
Fair.
So, by the way, my team struggles with it. The reason that Brian Kelly keeps giving up 250 yards on the ground per SEC loss is because they don't have the depth. That is the biggest position group that you have to have depth in. I understand your worries and concerns in reference to offense because there's so many unknowns. I just feel why do I not worry about Ryan Day offensively? Like, why do I feel like that they're going to figure that part out? That's the part of me is like, what is he just – Julian Sayin not going to be able to throw it up to Megatron, but Will Howard can?
Right. This is not a year to really fear that the transition of the play calling to Heartline like we talked about when that was announced. This isn't the year to really fear that because you have one of the most physically gifted freshman receivers ever.
So what if
if Sayin struggles, he's at least got a kid he could just toss the rock to. And
you got Cornell Tate and Max Clare there.
Brandon Innes is former highly recruited kid too. Yeah.
I mean, like, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm like, hey, receivers.
I mean, these guys got to step up, though. Everyone's got to step up.
I feel like Carnell Tate will. When you do look at their schedule, we've talked a little bit about that Texas game. When we look into it, I guess your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to quickly read through it as we usually do in these previews. Texas, they open up at home. They host Grambling State. They host Ohio. They get their first bye early on. They go to Washington, come back home against Minnesota, to Illinois, at Wisconsin, bye game, and then home against Penn State, at Purdue, home against UCLA, home against Rutgers, and then at Michigan. So the thing for me here, the 3 games that catch my attention, actually the 4 games. You're getting Texas coming off of all of this, which we could talk about in a second. You go to Illinois, and Illinois is going to be a great team this year, but I think you still beat them. You host Penn State, and having that battle at home, and also James Franklin not being able to beat you gives you a pretty good edge. Having to go to Michigan after last year's result is going to be a sticky situation, even if Bryce Underwood's starting and they're still figuring themselves out. So I think 10-2 is the more realistic expectation for this upcoming season, and we shouldn't be. If you went 10-2 this last year, 10-2 is likely in your cards this year with this schedule,
right?
And these changes.
I think I hate to put so much on an opening game because you have 11 more games that you have to play.
Yeah,
but Joe, I have more questions answered with Texas and Penn State than I do Ohio State.
That's the whole point, and that's why when we did those previews and we talked about them, both of those teams lead the discussion are 1-2 to win a national championship this upcoming year because the questions aren't there to be asked. They answered them by returning those starters.
Exactly. I mean, do we really think that Drew Aller gets worse? I don't think that they get worse.
No.
By the way, I understand the whole – look, I can go into this and talk about James Franklin and all that, and I get all of that. Joe, they return both of their running backs. Sound familiar? They got 2 really good backs. They don't have a receiving core, which Ohio State beats them in, but that offensive line that railroaded everybody. I mean, again, Joe, they're a yard away. Hold on. They're a yard away last year from beating you. Not making that up. I mean, every Ohio State fan that's watching this, deep down they know. They're at the goal line away from beating you. Those dudes return. I think I don't want to put everything on one game. You learn everything about this team in week 1. Now, teams will get better, and they will get better as the year goes on. But you will get so many questions answered about Ohio State in week 1. Joe, I got to be real with you. I could see the floor being 9-3 here. I can. I don't know if I see I don't know if I see a ceiling, and there would have to be a lot of collapse. I say a lot of collapse. No, they would have to lose to Penn State, Texas, and then one of the lose to Michigan. Joe, that can happen. So, oh man, I don't like that. I don't like even in saying that I don't like it. Right? I don't think that exists.
I think in the era where roster retention is now impossible. Okay. There's a lot of turnover, and the roster retention issues they have is not your typical ones. It's not hey, we had a bunch of kids leaving the portal. No, you just had all these great players move on to the NFL, and it's now time to reset. I think 9-3 is that floor because they have a harder schedule than some of these other Big Ten teams that we have spent time talking about. I think that the realistic outcome here is them going 10-2. Because they're well coached enough, and Ryan Day is good enough of a coach, and they're well recruited enough at certain positions that we're talking about. But I'm not giving them a ceiling higher than 10-2. I think that there's too many difficult games on the schedule for them to go better than 10-2. If they went 10-2 last year with everything going right, why the hell would they suddenly get better the following year? 2026 is the year to go 12-0 theoretically, not 2025.
Man, I don't know.
I'm just saying, let's be realistic. Like, you won a national title going 10-2. Why the heck would you expect to be better this year after losing all that?
Well, here's the thing, Joe. Not only that, you're losing 17 out of 22 starters. There's nobody in the country losing more production than you. No one.
Yes. Yep.
No one. I mean, listen, as much as people want to do whatever with Will Howard, I don't care. Brother, you won a game based off 2 defensive ends you lost that had a fumble recovery for 90-plus yards. You have a quarterback who, Joe, went 15 of 16 in the first half of a national title game, who's been around the block. There are going to be some bumps, and I think every Ohio State fan needs to get with that. All right.